What a beautiful sight the French surroundings make for this fourth meeting of the season of the Hagerty Radical Cup United Kingdom. We're now away round of the season, having raced most of the UK. That's where we are this weekend. Circuit Paul Ricard near Marseille in France. And as you can see on this very sunny Sunday morning, the weather conditions are just about perfect. It is clear blue skies, bright sunshine, an ambient temperature of about 21 degrees, track temperature 24 degrees, 74% humidity, and a slight breeze in the air. I would call that absolutely perfect weather conditions to go motor racing. Good morning, everybody. Scott Woodward here on commentary to take you through all of the action today. Three Hagerty Radical Cup UK races coming up for us today. The first of which is starting in around about just under 10 minutes time. And the next step in the 2024 championship will continue on. Of course, we've got both classes here in attendance this weekend. The faster SR3 class, of course, with its Fangio class for drivers aged 45 and over, for the more experienced drivers in the field. And we also have the top two in the Radical SR1 Cup class that are also racing on the grid this weekend as well. So for those new to the championship, it predominantly races in the UK, hence the title, Radical Cup UK, but it has already raced at three meetings at Donington Park, Snetterton and Alton Park, supporting the British Touring Car Championship. This is its one and only away day outside of the UK, where it's here supporting both Spanish F4 and the Euro Cup 3 Series. And then after that, the championship will then move on to its final two rounds afterwards, which will take it to final three rounds, in fact, take it to the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit at the end of the month, to Brands Hatch in the middle of September, and that's the finals of the UK series, and also the all-important Radical World Finals, which last year took place at Portimao in Portugal, but this time now takes place at the fantastic Yas Marina circuit, home of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. That takes place from November 7th to the 10th. So lots to be excited about going forwards. Radical, of course, is quite well renowned when you look at the entire motorsport sphere when it comes to Radical. All sorts of different championships that exist now all across the world, not just Europe. There's a series over in France, in Romania and Scandinavia as well. There's a bit of a presence growing in Asia with Korea and the Philippines as well. There's outlets in China and Indonesia on top of that. And also there's been quite a growth in North America. There is a few different championships that exist, not just Radical Cup North America, but different challenges in different states on top of that, plus also racing in Canada, even a Radical Cup Caribbean that exists on top of that too. And even then, of course, we've got the developing Radical Golf Cup on top of that, and it's springing out to Australia, and even the Radical Sim Racing Championship. Wherever you look, Radical is popping up all over the world in terms of motorsport. So our first 30-minute plus one lap race is getting set to get underway in a few minutes' time. As I mentioned, two classes racing this weekend in the championship, SR3 and SR1. The SR3 cars are the faster machines out in the mix. And in terms of the man to watch, well, apart from one race, the man to beat so far by a country mile has been Valor Racing's Chris Lulham. He has won all but one of the 9 races run so far, 8 race victories, and he has rarely won it by less than a few seconds. In fact, looking back at the previous round at Alton Park, his smallest winning margin, and I stress the word smallest winning margin, incredibly, was something like 29 seconds, which just shows how dominant he has been at some points in the season. Going back to the results, it was race 2 at Alton Park where he won by 29 seconds, the other 2 races by 31. His biggest winning margin of the season has actually been, in fact, come at Snetterton, where in the final race of the weekend, he won by over 40 seconds. That's just how dominant he's been so far. And that also translates into where he is in the championship, because if you look at the championship standings, Chris Lulham leads the way for Valor Racing on 436 points. His nearest challenger is kind of newcomer teammate Luke Hilton, who's running his first full senior season after graduating from last year's Fiesta Junior Championship. He is now has taken a multitude of second-place finishes, but he finds himself 60 points behind at the halfway stage of the championship, so lots of ground to try and make up. There literally is almost no stopping Chris at this point in time, and Paul Ricard will be an interesting point. And when we look at the grid in a moment, they'll take a very familiar look at the front of the field, because you can probably guess who's taken pole position. Third in the points in the SR3 Championship, Oscar Joyce, who has certainly been using all of his experience. Oscar is to get up to grips with the Radical cars, and the young Irishman has had his car and helmet spray painted by London graffiti artists. He also raced in the SR1 category last year, but he's now stepping up to a SR3. And beyond that as well, I think he's also been doing quite a lot of karting on top of that too, as we prepare for our first race. One thing I should point out is that the cars will be getting out for a rolling start. So the rolling start for the Radical cars, rather than the standing start for the other championships here this weekend. Yeah, a lot of karting experience for Oscar Joyce. Raced in SR1s last year, now into SR3s. Finds himself third in the championship. Has taken 2 podiums this season. Once at Alton Park last time out, and the second one was taken in the replacement third race for Donington because there was some timetable constraints due to poor weather and incidents at Donington Park. So because of that, Donington's third race had to be ran at the next event for the Radical Cup UK, which was their next BTCC support package outing. That meant they had 4 races in Norfolk, the first of which was the third race, and Oscar Joyce took a second place finish in that one after some very strong run. But that was the only race, in fact, also which Chris Lullen didn't win. He actually finished in 8th. That's his literal worst position. Every other race he's competed in, other than that third race for Donington, which ran at Snetterton, if you can follow, has all been a victory. And Oscar Joyce getting his first podium and doing quite well. He's only 3 points ahead of John McLeod at this point. John McLeod, who's probably the most experienced man on the grid, 14 years of radical racing, certainly proving using all that experience to full effect. He has so far picked up 2 podiums, one at Snetterton and one at Alton Park. He's had a multitude of top 5 finishes, 4th and 5th positions. His worst results have been a pair of 6th places, one at Donington and one at Alton. Certainly looking to try and use that as much as possible. Jason Rissover, 5th in the points, also quite experienced. Quite a few experienced drivers in the field here. 8 years of radical racing behind him. His best results so far have been 2nd place at Alton Park in the race just gone. And also he's had a couple of podium finishes on top of that, one at Donington, one at Snetterton. So he's taken podium finishes at every circuit he's raced at so far this year. And one would have to wonder if he's in good enough form to possibly add another rostering visit to his race at Paul Ricard this weekend. There's some work to do, starting with the 4th row of the grid. There's a bit of a mix-up in 1 or 2 of the positions. There are 1 or 2 guest drivers, some drivers who are making their first appearances, who are more familiar to those who follow the French Radical Cup, and also 1 or 2 of the drivers who you may have seen in the Golf Radical Cup if you followed that championship throughout the winter. 6th in points is Peter Tyler, also a driver with plenty of radical experience, 9 years plus a little bit of racing in Mazda MX-5s. He's had a pair of podium finishes, 2 third places. That's put him 6th in the points on 293. And Chris Preen currently 7th in SR3 class. Chris Preen with a good qualifying. He managed to put himself on the front row of the grid for race number 1, so we'll see if he can get a good start and try and at least initially get the better of Chris Lullen. Although Chris being so dominant, I think you'd be wise not to bet against Chris for trying to get a run into the first corner and to reach there first if he can. Chris Preen, who has plenty of radical and before that bike sports experience, and lots of sports prototype racing in the UK for him. He's had a podium at what was the replacement 3rd race for Donington, ran at Snetterton, so he's already had 1 podium this year. Next in the points is Adrian Hallmark, whose car will look, for those who are motorsport, particularly prototype and endurance racing fans, if you get a glimpse of his car, it'll look rather familiar to those who are Le Mans 24-hour fans, because he himself, Adrian, is a former CEO of Bentley. He's former CEO of Bentley. He's recently announced he's taking over as CEO of Aston Martin. But his car takes on the same livery that the 2003 Le Mans winning Bentley sports. So that's quite a novel kind of nod to that car, which won just over 20 years ago at Le Mans. Next in the points behind him is Paul Denning, who has a 4th place finish to his name. Paul not here this weekend, one of a couple of drivers who didn't take part at Alton Park last time. Jack Yang is also back this weekend, the Chinese driver, after he missed the opening round at Donington Park, competed at Snetterton, and then missed Alton Park. He's back for his 2nd outing. Regular racer both in the Radical Cup North America and in the Golf Series. Good to see him back out in the mix. He is also another of the regular Pro SR3 drivers. And then in the rest of the point scorers, it's Christian Brooks on 93, Stephen Shanty on 60, John Hewitt on 54, Rob Greenwood on 51, and Lee Jackson on 49. Now I can hear engines in my ear, which suggests that the cars are heading out of the pit lane and heading around towards the start of the race shortly. Of course, it's a rolling start for these guys. One thing we should also point out for this weekend, it is double points in the championship. So usually you would score 40 points for a victory. And the point system, if I bring it up in front of me, I can quickly run you through who usually scores what, as the safety car brings the pack out of the pit lane for their first activity of today. Of course, 3 races, so lots of track running for these guys. They've had plenty of testing and qualifying yesterday. Now today it's all about the racing. I'll come to the grid in a second as they come back around. So usually you would score 40 points for a victory, 35 for second, 30 for third, and then the points go down in increments of 3 down to, well, it's 27 points for fourth, and then down in 2s for fifth onwards. So it's 24 points for fifth position, 22 for 6th, then 20, 18, 9, 16 and 14 points for 10th place, and it carries on going down to from 12, 10, and then 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and then 2. You get 2 points in 20th position. We haven't got enough cars for 20th position anyway, so that should be fine. For Paul Ricard, and also for the final rounds of the championship, which take place on the Brands Hatch Indy circuit in September, it is double points, which means that a victory here in any of the 3 races sports you 80 points, and that can be certainly quite valuable, particularly as there is a 10-point difference between first and second place for what you score. That could really mean that Chris Lulham, who starts on pole position for race number 1, could really start to extend his lead even further and put himself into a position where he could be near untouchable at the front of the field. So as the cars make their way around the full Paul Ricard Grand Prix circuit, home of the French Grand Prix, of course, currently, it is quite a magnificent facility in itself. Paul Ricard is really a circuit that is a great mixture of long straights and lots of technical corners, which means there's plenty of opportunity for drivers to really get amongst it and to put in some strong laps. 5.842 kilometres, 3.630 miles, and 3 sectors. Of course, not the full Mistral straight down the back section of the circuit. They have to use the North chicane in the middle, same chicane that F1 uses. As they make their way around towards the end of the Mistral straight towards Senior Curve. This is how they line up for race number 1 this morning, with 3 races in the bag today. So, championship leader Chris Lulham starts from pole position. No surprises there. And he took pole by just a fraction under 1.2 seconds. That's how fast he is already this weekend. The only man to go into the 2-minute 8s, never mind 2-minute 9s. The next best time was Chris Preen on the front row of the grid, his Valor Racing teammate. He starts on the front row with a 2-minute 10.109. Then third place is the man from Radical France, Adrien Girard, who we want to watch for, of course, one of his more local circuits. He starts on the second row, competing in the Radical Cup France series. And for Aqua Rossa, which is the official Radical dealer for France, so he will be starting pretty well from the second row of the grid. And he'll start alongside Luke Hilton, who, of course, has had a multitude of second places for Valor Racing. He wants to try and get amongst it. In fact, Valor Racing have dominated the top 5 or 6 positions because Jack Yang, on his return, the Chinese driver, starts on row 3 alongside Alim Geshev. Alim himself, who is one of the Gulf Radical Cup competitors. He was third in the 2023-24 season. Then Jason Rishover and Oscar Joyce on the fourth row of the grid. Christian Brooks and Peter Tyler on row 5. Then John McLeod and another Gulf Radical competitor, Amir Feyzulin. Then Rob Greenwood and Marcus Littlewood, who was the first of our 2 SR1 drivers here, the top 2 in the championship here this weekend. And Adrian Hallmark and Sam Shaw, who is the second of the mix. Sam Shaw in the SR1 category also leads the way there from Marcus Littlewood by about 52 points. So, 2x2 formation, 30 minutes plus 1 lap for race 1 of the day for the Hagerty Radical Cup UK on their away round at Circuit Paul Ricard in France. It is championship leader Chris Lulham on pole position. Will he get the whole shot down towards turn 1 for the first time? The red lights are currently on. They come out any second. Long hold now. And race number 1 is go in Paul Ricard this morning. And straight away, as you'd expect, it is the blue and red car that, well, no, in fact, it isn't. I thought it was going to be Chris Lulham who gets the lead, but it's not. It's Chris Preen who does get the whole shot down towards the very chicane, but here comes Lulham down the inside, and Lulham doesn't lead into turn 1. It's Chris Preen with the advantage, who turns into a left-hander. And already trying to go on the attack, I think, is Alim Geshev for second place. So that was a cracking start for Alim Geshev, up to second place, third place already. So not a good start for the championship leader, but Lulham's into second place. It's Hilton up to third now. Geshev fourth. Brooks in 5th position. Adrien Girard from the second row of the grid. He's down to 6th position, so not a good start for the Radical Cup France man. But the top 3 pulling away even early doors. The spinner in the mid-pack already. Someone's looped it around. I couldn't quite catch who it was. We'll see who goes tumbling down the timing screen. And it was, I think, no, it's Jason Rishover, in fact. Jason Rishover is the one towards the back of the field. He's the one that's had the spin. So he continues on. He's got some work to do, plenty of time to try and make it up. Down the Mistral straight for the first time. So Chris Preen then takes the early advantage here, with Chris Lulham in second place, Hilton in third, also Christian Brooks with a strong start. Christian started in ninth position, is up to fourth already, so good start, up 5 spots from Christian. The man who currently sits in 11th in the points, only made 1 appearance so far this year at Donington Park. Missed both Stetson and Olsen, but good to see him back out for Paul Ricard this weekend. And certainly marking his return with a very strong start in the opening lap already. Rest of the pack turns its way through as Chris Lulham going on the attack here towards the right-hander at Beauce. Trying to squeeze his way past. He'll be on the outside line for the next corner, which is the Virage de Bondor. And if he can try and hold the line, might be a chance to try and get through. Running wide there was Chris Lulham, in fact. He ran wide on the exit the corner. And now here comes his teammate Luke Hilton. Up the inside into Virage de la Tour. And Chris Lulham down to third place. Lulham coming back at him on the inside through the Virage du Pont. He's not content ending the first lap in third place, is he? End of the first lap. It's Preen who leads. Lulham in second place. It's then Brooks showing in third place because he's also. I think Hilton possibly ran wide, and it's now Brooks into third place. Where's he come from? Christian Brooks has come from nowhere. He's up to third place, past Luke Hilton, second in the championship. And now it could be a 5-way fight because Adrian Girard's in the mix here. But this is interesting. Chris Lulham, who has been dominant on the UK circuits but hasn't had the fastest start, got beaten to turn 1 by Chris Preen and now under threat on the second lap of the race already. Out onto the Mistral straight for the second time. This is not the typical Chris Lulham domination performance we've seen so far already, but Lulham just is literally shoved underneath the rear wing of Chris Preen. Which way is he going to go? He must be lining up for an attack here towards the chicane. He's got Brooks, Hilton and Girard going with him down towards the North chicane at the first pass of the Mistral straight. No attack here. He's got a good exit here on the run towards the second part of Mistral towards Senior Curve. And I wonder, he must be lining up for a pass here surely, unless he's just trying to put Preen under as much pressure as possible. Here he goes, up inside in towards the Beauce, and through he goes into the lead. So there was an undercut exiting Senior, and a move done by the championship leader. So through goes Chris Lulham, midway through lap 2, into the lead here in race 1 of the weekend in the Hagerty Radical Cup UK, back in his customary position at the head of the field. And I wonder now, what can that Christian Brooks has got with him? Unless I'm missing something, how has Christian Brooks got to second place? He's just absolutely just charging his way through. And Christian Brooks, who, if you look at his results from Donington Park, he did pick up a second place and a third, so he was on the podium twice. So here's the replay then. This is how it happened. So Chris Lulham went up the inside, and it happened, I think, slightly out of our sight, because it must have been down in through Bondor that Chris Preen has run wide and got out of shape trying to defend or try and repass Chris Lulham. Because of that, it's put Christian Brooks into second place. And Christian now is not letting Chris Lulham get away here in these early stages. He's now looking at the last lap. You know, his last lap was only about roughly a tenth or so slower. So perhaps if Christian can put in a couple of solid laps here, he can try and stay with Chris. But Chris certainly has been the pace of the field. Into the pit lane has come Sam Shaw. And that's the SR1 Championship leader, and he's shaking his head saying it must be all over. Now that's quite significant because he is one of the only 2 SR1 Cup drivers, but they are arguably the 2 most significant because they're the top 2 in the championship. And if Sam Shaw doesn't score here, that'll be advantage Marcus Littlewood, who will race on, I'm sure, to take himself a free bunch of points in the SR1 category. That will certainly help his chances to close the gap in. The gap between them is some 52 points. If you can pick up 80 points here, that will certainly catapult him into the championship lead in class. So one to watch there. Sam Shaw with lots of problems. Also, Luke Hilton's in the pit lane as well, I've just noticed. Luke Hilton's second in the championship, also in the pit lane. So the man who had a victory at Snetterton in that replacement race for Donington, and also has had a multitude of second place finishes, might well lose even more advantage to his teammate and championship leader Chris Lulham. That's quite significant. So Luke Hilton with problems in race number 1 already at this early stage, and given the fact he might be about to go a lap down, it shows that ultimately this weekend has not quite started out the way he'd hoped. So Chris Lulham and co do put a lap on both Sam Shaw and Luke Hilton, and Lulham already trying to extend the advantage. The gap is now about just under a second or so. The last time by, Lulham sets a new fastest lap of the race and extends the gap by another 0.4 of a second. So at the moment, Lulham has this all under control in the early stages. It's not quite the 30-40 second lead he's had so far this season at circuits like Snetterton and Alton Park. But certainly trying to be kept honest. A little bit further back, this is Adrien Girard, our Radical Cup France runner, who is here as a kind of a guest for the weekend. He's coming under threat from Oscar Joyce in his rather uniquely liveried number 98 machine. That car, which has not only had it been painted by London graffiti artist, but so too is his helmet. As we see a rather fed-up Sam Shaw sat at the wheel of his SR1, and unfortunately, that car seems as though it's going no further for race 1. Hopefully, whatever the issue is, they can get it fixed for race 2. And in fact, Sam Shaw, yeah, climbing out of the car, you can see as Oscar Joyce goes diving up the inside into the chicane and picks off Adrien Girard to pick up 4th position. So that's a bold move there from Oscar, the youngster using all of his karting experience to good use. And it's great to see drivers like Oscar Joyce and Luke Hilton, who are quite young drivers who have come through karting or the junior ranks of circuit racing, now moving into Radical Cup UK. It's good to see some drivers here that are looking at potential moves into prototype racing. There's the move from Oscar Joyce on Adrien Girard to pick up 4th place on the Frenchman. Oscar Joyce, the young Irishman, using all his skill to full effect to make that move happen. There goes Chris Preen in the foreground in 3rd position. There's our fight for 4th, with Joyce now ahead of Girard. 6th place still now for Jack Yang, the Chinese driver. He's just 1.2 seconds ahead of John McLeod, who himself is battling away with another experienced hand in Peter Tyler. Less than a second between them. Also just behind them, about half a second, is Alim Geshev, the UAE driver from the Gulf Radical Cup. Good to see we've got a couple of international drivers who are guessing on this Radical Cup UK weekend, particularly with a couple of the one driver who's more prominent in the ranks of the French Championship, and 2 drivers who are from the Gulf Radical Cup. Of course, remember this year's Radical World Finals take place at Yas Marina this year from the 7th to the 10th of November. That's going to be quite an occasion. And who knows, if Chris Lulham goes there, he might well win the whole damn thing, because at the rate he's going, he is absolutely not just spread eagling the field, but in terms of the race, but also in terms of the championship. 8 wins from the first 9 races, and so far he's on course to make it 9 from 10. He's still got quite a way to go, 20 minutes plus 1 lap. But the Valor Racing 1-2 at the front. It's Valor Racing 1-2-3, in fact, because all 3 of the drivers at the front of the field are all Valor Racing runners. 4th place in the DW Racing run number 95 car is Oscar Joyce. And Adrien Girard's his car is run by Aqua Rossa Motorsport, which is the official Radical dealer for France. So it's technically a Radical France factory team or works team in inverted commas. Good to see using all of his local knowledge of the Paul Ricard circuit to full effect. Chris Lulham, who, for those who are unaware, is quite a prominent sim racer as well. He's part of Team Redline, which is owned and run by a certain 3-time Formula 1 world champion by the name of Max Verstappen. I think the livery of his car also kind of reflects the Team Redline colours and the almost Max Verstappen colours on top of that. There are the DW Racing squad watching on for their charges. Also Peter Tyler and Sam Shaw running with them. Of course, Sam Shaw out of the race now, sadly, in the SR1 class. We should give reference to Marcus Littlewood. He is in 13th overall, in the slightly slower and slightly smaller SR1 class. There you go, the foreground, Jack Yang looks like, ahead of John McLeod and Peter Tyler, and they're just behind them, and the all-white Radical is Amir Fazulin. Jason Rishover, who's been recovering after his spin as well. Jason, who is in the 360 competition car. He's renting the new 5th gen SR3 XXR from the Radical factory, so that's why he's probably not in his usual white, blue and yellow paint scheme. He's now in the red and yellow of the factory colours of Radical. He's comparing this car against his own 3rd generation SR3 RSX. So giving it a go and seeing how he feels with this newer car. And currently running in 10th, but of course he would be running a little bit higher, obviously, had he not had the spin. But he's on the comeback trail and at least finding himself in the top 10. So out of the chicane, onto the second part of the Mistral straight goes Chris Lulham. Now the gap is 1.5 seconds, so this is not a race where Chris Lulham's been allowed to just set off into the distance and sail away with the victory. Chris Brooks has kept him as honest as he can. He's not allowed him to get away too far. In fact, actually, he's stronger in the second half of the second sector of the race because he's up there in there too. Now, there is Adrian Hallmark. Now, remember what I said about the Bentley-looking livery on that car? If you call a glimpse of it, there it is. Fans of the 2003 Le Mans winner will certainly recognise how that car looks, with its Bentley-esque livery there, with its British Racing green, silver and black. And the camera shot stayed there because he's about to be put a lap on by the top 2, Chris Lulham and Christian Brooks. Now, in the second sector, I should point out, I was about to mention, Christian Brooks was about 3/10 quicker, and he matched Chris Lulham in the third sector. The gap is 1.6 seconds, but it's only gone up by about literally 100th of a second. So here at Paul Ricard, Chris Brooks, there he is in second place. Car 82, the second of the Valor Racing cars in the field, is keeping his teammate and championship leader quite honest here. He's not allowing Chris to relax one iota. Into the first sector. Chris has now put in a 35.067 compared to a 35.2 for Christian Brooks, so another 2/10 lost. But this is where, on the Mistral straight and through the chicane, this is where Christian Brooks seems to get it back, and I wonder if it's possible because he's got a slightly lower downforce setup that allows him to run a little bit faster on the straight. He'll also have something of a toe, a very loose toe, but a toe nonetheless, for Chris Lulham on the back straight. That will just allow him to close up a little bit more, whilst Chris Lulham has to punch the hole in the air, having no one around him to be able to tow himself. And indeed, yes, in the second sector, coming through, as in the pit lane comes 99. And that is that's James Pinkerton. He's in the special SR10 XXR development car. That car is getting its own kind of race development. A little bit of more of a well-publicised test session for this car and for James. Of course, James himself, head of R&D for Radical. He's based at the Peterborough factory and has got some pedigree. He was 2016 SR1 champion before joining Radical as part of their factory ranks. Good to see James giving that car a run out. Of course, that car is an invitation car, essentially. It's not going to score any points, not here for any results. It's purely here for development. Good to see Radical developing their race cars in a proper race environment rather than just pounding around doing lots of testing laps. They're doing so with other cars on track in a race, etc. And thankfully, you see what I mean here, it's not getting in the way of anyone. It's quietly getting on its own program. But good to see another next generation of Radical on track also amongst the SR3 and SR1 machines, and that car continuing its development as it goes on. The leaders make their way through the Est de la Verrerie, the opening S-bend, before they come back towards Virage de l'Hôtel, and then Virage du Comp, and the midway little short shoot between Comp and Virage de la Sainte-Baume That's the end of the first sector. We'll have a look and see where we are in terms of pace. It's currently 1.7 seconds the gap. So out goes James Pinkerton. Now, interestingly, in that first sector, Christian Brooks was about 400ths faster. It's about half a tenth quicker or so than Lullen this time by. They're coming up to put a lap on Adrian Hallmark in the Bentley-esque looking number 8 machine. And this will be a benefit to Lullen because he'll be able to get a tow from him and try and maintain the gap from Christian Brooks. There goes the development SR10 with James Pinkerton at the wheel. And looking here, this is James Yang, by the look of it, in 6th position in car 21. Out of the complex he goes. But no, in fact, my apologies, that's Chris Preen, in fact, forgive me. Chris Preen in 3rd position, Oscar Joyce chasing him down. Looking at the lap times between those two as Chris Lullen puts a lap on Adrian Hallmark, and that's going to give him a bit of breathing space between himself and Christian Brooks. The gap for 3rd place has come down by a few. That fact, the last time by, Oscar Joyce was 4 tenths quicker, and that was also in the first 2 sectors alone, has taken another 7 tenths out of 3rd place man Chris Preen. So the man who led early on, here's the battle we need to focus on. He's being put under threat now for the last spot on the podium by Oscar Joyce, who's coming on strong in this second half of the race. He's pulled away from Adrian Girard after that move into the chicane. Now as they come down the hill towards the start of another lap and through the Verrerie S-bend, still Lullen from Brooks, the gap maintained at about 1.6 seconds. And actually, Brooks was quicker in the first 2 sectors, including the second sector, where he was better by 3 tenths of a second. So Christian Brooks has got something, but just needs to hook it all up and be a bit more consistent in these next few laps to try and get himself into touching distance of trying to make a possible attempt for the lead on Lullen. He's lost a bit of time in the first sector, 3 tenths in fact. So all the time he gained on Lullen in that lap before, he's lost it all again in the first sector. But again, his car seems to be a little more superior in a straight line, possibly due to a slightly lower downforce setup on that car. And of course, he'll be getting a slight tow, as I mentioned, from Lullen. Again, it won't be very much, but it'll be slight. And we'll see exactly how close he's been able to get in this second sector if he can. There he goes. And the gap is now at the end of the second sector. It has come down, but only by about a half a tenth, so not too much. But Lullen he's there or thereabouts in the mix. I just see in the background also, I think Adrian Hallmark has decided, rather than keep himself on track, as to let the rest of the leading cars go through, he's parked it momentarily on the very grippy AstroTurf on the inside of the chicane. But that's at least quite a smart move to do in many cases. Park the car off the road briefly so you can let the faster cars go through. It's good awareness from Adrian Hallmark, so well done for him for keeping out of the way. And ultimately, Adrian will just be enjoying himself. He's obviously, of course, off to become CEO of Aston Martin, but of course he's still enjoying himself at the wheel of a Radical Sports prototype. Speaking of enjoying himself, Chris Lullen continues to charge on. And I was looking back at some of the races that were televised on the BTTC coverage last night, and the Snetterton race 3, where he dominated by 40 seconds in the end and just kept on constantly setting fastest lap after fastest lap after fastest lap. And I remember he was asked at post-race, that was quite a ruthless run for you, in terms of a ruthless race for you. And I think Steve Ryder meant to talk about the fact he was continuing to set more faster and faster laps, but Chris Lullen, I think, thought that he meant it was about the weather conditions, which of course they were quite tricky. But what was even more impressive was the fact that Chris was doing so and pulling away that much and dominating that much in such very difficult weather conditions where there was rain and lots of water around. Thankfully, no trouble of water here this weekend. It's beautiful blue skies, warm temperature, still 21 degrees air temperature. Track temperature's gone up to about 27 degrees. Getting a little warmer since that when we started. And still a very, very gentle breeze in the air as well. So Not going to affect him too much in terms of any crosswinds or aids of any toes in the mix. Now there's a car that's pulled off to the right-hand side. It's Christian Brooks. Christian Brooks from second place has pulled up on the exit of the Saint-Baume corner on the top of the Mistral straight. And the man who was keeping Chris Dullum so honest in the first two-thirds of the race has sadly pulled up at the top of the straight. Well, that, I'm afraid, is a real shame, because Chris Dullum was, I'm sure, enjoying that little kind of stalemate between the two of them. But this now means that Chris is now some 15 seconds up the road, and ultimately now, Chris Preen versus Oscar Joyce is now for second place rather than third. But that is absolutely a real shame for Christian Brooks. He was having such a magnificent race on his first time back since Donington Park, where he's picked up a second place and a third, and did keep, looking at the results, he did keep, well, I say he kept Chris Dullum quite honest. He was just 15 seconds back in race 1, and then he was third in race 2, some 11 seconds off the victory. So Christian Brooks, I'm afraid, his race has come to a rather premature end. And it now means that Chris Dullum is all by himself out in front. Now here's the fight for second place we need to watch for. Oscar Joyce in white and green against the kind of multicoloured orange and yellow number 95 Oscar Joyce. And Joyce here is trying to shape him up for a move, I think. Through the hotel complex. And now towards the right-hander at Camp Corner. And now onto Saint-Baume and back onto the Mirage of the Mistral straight. Once again, we are on lap 11. Of course, there are yellow flags out on the exit of Saint-Baume as Christian Brooks' car is pushed away. But now out of the yellow flag zone, I'm sure, and down towards the chicane, Oscar Joyce has his best chance here of putting an attack on to Chris Preen down towards the chicane. If not here, you might try and get him on the exit and set him up for a move through Senior and up towards the Beauce. Using all the curb on the exit, Chris Preen just pushing on here. Is he going to be able to hold on for the next 6.5 minutes plus 1 lap with the way that Oscar Joyce is attacking? You'd imagine it might be a case of when rather than if he goes through. Young Oscar Joyce looking very impressive indeed, and putting the pressure on Chris Preen, who, again, 8 years of radical racing experience. Oscar Joyce, of course, in his first full season, I believe. He has done some SR1 racing last year, but I don't believe that was a full campaign. This year, of course, fully into the SR3 class. Trying to push as hard as he dares as he comes out through Bondor, through Courbe de Garlaban, into Virage de la Tour, and Virage du Pont to end another lap. Here is the leader, Chris Dullum, spread eagling the field here in car 20. And I think that Chris will certainly be someone to watch out for in the future. If he decides to go the prototype and endurance racing route, I think that Chris Dullum is going to be somebody who will certainly be talked about when it comes to possibly competing at Le Mans or in prototype racing within the next few years, because Chris is absolutely showing all the hallmarks of a future possible world endurance or prototype racing star. With the pace that he can set, and whatever his ambition may be, I think he would be perfectly suited to get himself onto a world endurance grid or an European Le Mans Series grid or an IMSA grid somewhere at some point in the future. But he's certainly learning his craft at the wheel of a Radical and doing it in absolutely fine style. Now, fight for second, still relatively deadlocked between Chris Preen and Oscar Joyce. The last time by, Oscar Joyce was again 4/10 quicker. So that's their best lap times, forgive me. Their last laps, okay, Joyce was about a 10th or so quicker, and he's actually lost half a second in the first sector, which is interesting. But even so, he's right back on the tail of Preen as they come through sector 2. So whatever time Oscar Joyce lost in that first sector has come back to him by about a quarter of a second. And again, almost tucked underneath the rear wing of the number 3 machine. Chris Preen, we should mention, is leading the Fangio class, which is for drivers aged 45 and over. And he leads that contest ahead of John McLeod in second place and Peter Tyler in third. Then it is Amir Fazulin in fourth position. It's fifth position for Rob Greenwood and sixth for Adrian Hallmark in that particular category. So Chris Preen will certainly be first past the post in one of the contests today. Also a shout out for Marcus Littlewood, the sole remaining SR1 out of the two that are here this weekend. Of course, Sam Shaw pitted with an issue. Of course, also Luke Hilton pitted with an issue at some point in the beginning of the race after only a couple of laps. He was someone I'm certain would have been shaping up to give the likes of Lulham and Christian Brooks a bit of a challenge. But it seems as though that despite the early pressure from both Brooks and Lulham, that Chris Lulham has, from Brooks and Hilton, I should say, Chris Lulham has just had fortune go his way, whilst both Brooks and Hilton have had their own dramas and problems, and have simply just fallen away, which is unfortunate. Whoops! Spinner for 47, that's Rob Greenwood. Loops it on the exit of Virage DuPont, but a nice little simple rotation, and back away he goes unscathed. Remains in 11th place. And also retains the top 5 spot in the Fangio class. Now through the first sector, again, Chris Preen actually set the fastest first sector of anyone that time by. So the gap went out again to about 7/10 of a second. But Oscar Joyce, we know, is better in the second sector because he does gain some of that time back. So we'll keep an eye on that. There goes John McLeod in the foreground. Just behind him is Peter Tyler and Amir Fazulin. Also just behind them is Alim Geshev and Jason Rishover, and they're quite close together. So a couple of fights happening for potentially 7th and 8th positions and 9th and 10th. So the second half of the top 10 is getting a little bit busier as we head towards the penultimate lap of the race. And Chris Lulham will come across the line shortly to start his penultimate lap, because of course it's 30 minutes plus 1 lap, so the timer will hit 0 on this next lap, but of course it won't be the end of the race because they'll get shown the board to do one more time around the Paul Ricard Grand Prix circuit, which unfortunately means that Chris Preen has to defend from Oscar Joyce for the next 2 laps. Meanwhile, Oscar Joyce will be rubbing his hands with glee, metaphorically, to get himself possibly a step higher on the podium. As we flick back to our very dominant race winner, the race leader and championship leader, of course, Chris Lulham, who, well, I think Paul O'Neill said it best at Snetterton, you run out of superlatives for him because he simply just keeps on dominating proceedings and winning and winning and winning in this year's Radical Cup UK Championship, sponsored by Hagerty. And it's not his biggest winning margin. As I mentioned, that one came at Snetterton, some 40 seconds in the wet. But it has been another typical Chris Lulham performance. There goes Amir Geshev, one of our entries that have been more familiar in the Golf Radical Cup UK. And here's a small little shot of James Pinkerton, who is in the SR10 XXR development car. Again, just running by itself, just quietly getting on with its program. But nice to see it out there in a race environment. And it's actually, in terms of track position, just between Chris Lulham and the fight for second place. So Lulham turns his way through the double boat, the Bose. The timer hits 0, which means we get one more time around the circuit. And Chris is now on course, currently, for his 9th win in 10 races. And if anyone's going to bet against him for the championship now, I think that's a fool to do so, because Chris is certainly proving that he is the man on the pace, he is the man to beat. And using all of that expertise around him with Valentine, and also I'm certain his Redline teammates in sim racing will certainly be giving him some tips. Nonetheless, I'm sure he's been learning a few things from Max Verstappen himself. The signal for the final lap goes out onto the electronic lighting board at the top of the lighting gantry. And onto the last lap goes the fight for second place. Now, on that last time by, Joyce was again 3/10 quicker, and he was pretty close to Chris Preen heading down the pit straights. Is there a chance he could get through on this final lap? Lulham, meanwhile, continues on. Their second place nose to tail. So Oscar Joyce then has got one more chance, one more lap to try and snatch this second place away. Chris Preen will do everything he can to defend as they approach again through Virage de l'Hotel up towards Camp Corner. Nothing there. If he can get a really good exit here, Oscar Joyce could have a chance to get through, but looks like Preen's much more comfortable on the throttle off these tighter corners. A bit more traction next in Camp Corner gets him through Saint-Baume and onto the Mistral straight for the final time. As for this man, there's just no stopping him, is there? Many are trying, many have tried so far, and they did try. As in the background, I just saw a possible dart out between Oscar Joyce and Chris Preen. Oscar did put himself into Chris's mirrors for a second. As Lulham goes through out of shot. There goes the development SR10 XXR James Pinkerton. And I don't think there's been any change in the second sector. No, Chris Preen pulled away by 3/10, and then it's been pretty much matched by Oscar Joyce in terms of the second sector. So a handful of tenths lost at this point. And unless something major happens, touch wood, I think the top three is just about set. But as Chris Lulham turns his way through Virage de la Tour, up to Virage du Pont, it's the same story, but still, to make it any less more entertaining, it'll be his 9th win from 10 races in the championship. Chris Lulham charges to the checkered flag and takes victory in race 1 of the day in the Hagerty Radical Cup UK at a canter once again, almost 20 seconds out in front. And now we wait and wait and wait, because second place is on its way. Is it going to be Chris Preen or Oscar Joyce? Well, the camera quickly gave us a glimpse there, but across the line they'll come, and it is Chris Preen who takes the second place in the end. It is going to be also a victory in the Fangio class for Chris Preen too. Oscar Joyce picks up third place. Adrian Girard is fourth, our Radical Cup France runner. It's a fine result for Jack Yang. He picks up fifth position. Fifth place for him is actually his best result of the season, so congratulations to him. That's only Oscar Joyce's third podium of the season. And for Chris Preen, it's only his second podium of the season too. That's his best result also, with second place, so congratulations. Sixth goes to John McLeod, seventh goes to Peter Tyler, eighth goes to Alim Geshev. Ninth, after recovering from a spin on the opening lap, goes to Jason Rishover. And then it's 10th place for Amir Faizouli. He was a little higher than that at one point. Finishes down in 10th. Rob Greenwood recovers from a spin to pick up 11th place. And then across the line coming shortly will be, I'm certain, our SR1 winner, our sole SR1 winner left, and that was Marcus Littlewood, because Sam Shaw retired very early on. I think it was after the first couple of laps, which is a shame. But again, that will be massive points for Marcus Littlewood. He crosses the line now and confirms himself as SR1 victor. There he is. And of course, the cars that we lost in that race, two key front runners, particularly when they were both trying to challenge Chris Lulham in the early stages, and throughout most of the race, for one of them at least, Christian Brooks, after, what was it, 20 minutes of pursuit chasing after Chris Lulham, his car pulls to the side with some kind of mechanical issue just after the exit of Saint-Baume coming onto the Mistral straight. And he then has to try and rethink his options for race number 2. Also, Luke Hilton was out of the race very early. And also I'm seeing on the screen here as well that, for reasons I'm not quite sure, Amir Faizoulin has been disqualified. But for what reason, I don't know. The race control hasn't told us why he's been disqualified. But he was up there in the top 10, but for reasons I genuinely know not, he has been disqualified from the result, which is odd, but there we go. So to quickly run through the results, it is Chris Lulham who wins by 20 seconds in the end from Chris Preen in second place and Oscar Joyce in third. It's Chris Lulham's 9th win in 10 races, while Chris Preen and Oscar Joyce also take their personal best finishes of the season too. Adrien Girard, our Radical France runner, was 4th ahead of Jack Yang in 5th, his best finish of the year in the top 5. And it's John McLeod and Peter Tyler from Alim Geshev in 8th position. Jason Rishover takes 9th. And after Amir Fayzulin's disqualification, in which we're still mystified as to why that's happened, it is Rob Greenwood who picks up the final top 10 spot. Marcus Littlewood was the sole remaining SR1 driver after Sam Shaw dropped out early on. So he takes the victory in that category. It's then Adrian Hallmark in 12th. And the cars we lost, of course, Christian Brooks, who stopped on track on the Mistral Straight. Luke Hilton, who also pitted early on. And so too did Sam Shaw. And as we also mentioned, Amir Fayzulin with that disqualification. So 80 points goes the way of Chris Lullam. And with no finish for Luke Hilton, I think that also drops him, but possibly, yes, it does actually, out of second place, because it being double points is 80 points for a win and 70 points for second place. That means it's 80 points that goes the way of Lullam, and that will put him on, with my rudimentary GCSE maths, it's funny because it's true, 516 points with that 80 points. Plus, I think you also get points for fastest lap, if I'm correct, and the like. Yeah, you get a bonus point for pole position of a classified starter, plus also you get a bonus point for pole in their class and for fastest lap. And I think that's 3 extra bonus points for Chris Lullam. So that, in fact, actually gives him the maximum score once again, which I think should be 83 points, nonetheless. But there is Chris Lullam, who, if you've seen him in some of the other broadcasts, is pretty relaxed about it all, really. That was a rather casual Sunday morning drive. Had some early pressure from Christian Brooks. Didn't get the whole shot into turn 1 either. He was beaten to turn 1 by Chris Preen, and then momentarily also by Luke Hilton with a strong start. And then Christian Brooks charged his way through up to second. Had some good pace, but sadly his car ran out and unfortunately had to retire midway through. That's becoming a regular sight, isn't it? Chris Lullam knelt down next to the #1 board for Radical Motorsport. Another victory in the books, and certainly taking one step closer to the 2024 Radical Cup UK title. Now look at the double points, because both here and at Brands Hatch is double points. That should be key. So here's highlights from race 1 then. It wasn't Chris Lullam Polster who took the lead into turn 1. In fact, it was Chris Preen's front row sitter who beat him to the first corner and led the opening couple of laps. A spin for Jason Rishover saw him into the mix. Chris Lullam wasted no time, meanwhile, at the front of the field to try and pick his way through. First past Luke Hilton, who dropped out after 2 laps. Then this move into Debose gave Lullam the lead, and also saw Christian Brooks squeeze through. Sam Shaw meant that there was no battle for the SR1 fight in race 1 after he retired after 2 laps. There was also a fight early on for Oscar Joyce. He made a move up the inside of Adrien Girard to pass him for 4th position. He then started setting off after third place Chris Preen, who by now was having to watch the top 2 drive away from him. Chris Lullam now in his customary lead position. And in second place there was Christian Brooks, matching him pace for pace in terms of lap times. The top 2 pulled away pretty comfortably out in front. No matter what Christian tried to do, he couldn't quite close the gap as much as he could. Development work for James Pinkerton in the SR10 XXR, running it as an invitation machine and invisible for results, but good to see them getting plenty of mileage. Chris Lullam continues to lead as he cut through the traffic. As further back, there was plenty of battles going on in the midfield in this field that also featured French and UAE drivers from Gulf Radical Cup. Chris Preen then found himself in a fight for 3rd place with Oscar Joyce, as more battles went on between them, and Chris Preen just about had enough to keep Oscar Joyce at bay. Despite the best efforts of the Irishman, couldn't quite find the pace to get through. And this battle kept up all the way to the end, to the checkered flag, to try and make it happen. And Oscar Joyce got close on several occasions, but just while he managed to get advantage in 1 point, that wasn't quite going to work out in that case. For Chris Lullam, it was another victory. He's 9th in 10 races, and after Christian Brooks' retirement in race number 2, he then gave, from second place, it gave Chris Preen second place, and 3rd to Oscar Joyce. So some fine racing from the Hagerty Radical Cup UK, once again, on their one and only appearance outside of the UK. Of course, they've got 2 more races coming up later on today. The timetable suggests they'll be racing local time in France. Their next race is set to be at around about 5 to 11. And then their final race of the day taking place at 2:25. So quite a busy schedule for the Radical Cup UK today. As I mentioned, all their testing was on from practice was on Friday, more practice yesterday, and the qualifying session yesterday. And then today's 3 races. So a very busy day of activity and racing. And what will be intriguing to see is if the likes of Luke Hilton, Sam Shaw, and Christian Brooks, who had those issues, if they can get them fixed for race number 2 as soon as possible, because they've only got local time. It's now currently showing as being about 9:45. So they've actually got only about an hour and 10 minutes to fix these cars, because we've now got the qualifying sessions coming up for the 2 single-seater races today. It's championships today, which is the Spanish F4 Championship and Euro Cup 3. So not a big turnaround time between these first 2 races. A bit more of a grace period for race 3, because they've then got, after their race finishes, about just shy of 3 hours to get those cars sorted. So the teams are going to be up against it, but I think the likes of Hilton, Brooks, and possibly Sam Shaw, we're going to have to hope it's a simple fix. But there is Chris Lulham. I think he's just talking there with, I think that's possibly Luke Hilton on the left-hand side, who explaining what happened here. And Chris also just talking about his early battles. And if somebody dominates these races, he doesn't look too, I want to say excited, but of course he must be delighted with the fact that he's, winning races. And of course the livery of his Valor Racing Radical bears a striking resemblance to the break of the team colours of Redline and of course Max Verstappen. And certainly using all of their expertise to full effect also. So I'm guessing we're going to be waiting possibly for some kind of a podium presentation, I think, before we wrap up our coverage of race number 1 here at Circuit Paul Ricard this morning. As you can see, the weather is absolutely glorious. I would classify this genuinely perfect weather conditions for motorsport. Well done, Chris Preen, who started from the front row of the grid, led early on course, remember, and then was overtaken into Debose by Chris Lulham. And had Luke Hilton also been involved there, it could have been quite a fascinating 3-way fight for the victory. As it happens, Chris Preen, in the end, found himself in a fight with third-place man Oscar Joyce in the closing stages. And it was initially for third before Christian Brooks then found himself parked on the exit of the Saint-Baume complex and onto the Mistral Straight, which meant that elevated the stakes for that battle a little more. There is the 39 car of Adrien Girard, as I mentioned, who competes in the Radical Cup France series. So if Radical Cup France still have a round coming up at Paul Ricard, which I might just check, in fact, actually, whilst we've got a little bit of time. I haven't given the instruction yet to wrap up, so I've got some time to talk about that for a second. And well, it says here their actual rounds are taking place this weekend. So they've had races at Magny-Cours and Lebanon. So he is I think maybe the only competitor in Radical Cup France, I think. So he is, this puts points towards that. And then of course we've got the World Finals for them coming up next. The Gulf Radical Cup, which comes up shortly. In, of course, over the prime racing season for the Middle East, but of course for us here in Europe it's more the winter. Gulf Radical Cup, which happens in the UAE, that's taking place and beginning from the end of October, where they have runs at Dubai Autodrome. Then the Radical World Finals that take place at Yas Marina in early to mid-November. And the rest of the Gulf Radical Cup series takes place from the end of November pretty much all the way through to the mid to end of April, which is quite a long season given how the Middle Eastern season normally runs. It's usually kind of all the way to April, which is quite intriguing to see how they're running. That's almost technically their winter in a way, or autumn winter over in Dubai in terms of weather. But they are flitting between Dubai Autodrome and Yas Marina for that season, and moving their way once on one from one circuit to the other, back and forth. As you can see, some quite wonderful scenery here at Paul Ricard. It is quite a wonderful location for them. And it's nice to see Radical Cup UK going to an overseas race. Some people kind of talk about championships that, for example, are a national championship for a country that goes into other circuits outside of their country, and they kind of think, well, why are they doing that? Because it's not a UK circuit, so why are they going to a different race? But it's simply just to try and diversify the calendar a little bit more, and also give them an extra test. And several other championships do that. I've seen DTM in the past do that, where it's primarily supposed to be a German series, but they go to all sorts of circuits over the course of Europe. Same with, on top of that, British GT as well, who of course is a Radical Cup, I'm sure has been around at one point or another. They have a regular away round. They have one at Spa usually. Last year they went to Portimao. So it's nice to have Radical Cup at a different circuit compared to all the UK circuits they've gone to. And a nice sort of varied calendar in terms of different paddocks, different environments to be around as well. Of course, they had those first 3 meetings supporting the British Touring Car Championship throughout the first half of the season at Donington, then Stettisham, and then Alton Park. Just they're going to go back to the UK, of course, after this weekend. Their next 2 rounds will be the Silverstone GP circuit at the end of the month, so only a couple of weeks to wait until we see the Hagerty Radical Cup UK back out in action. And then the middle of September for the final rounds at Brands Hatch Indy Circuit, where we'll start to crown some champions. And I'm certain if he doesn't have one hand on the trophy already by the end of Silverstone, Chris Lullen will be in a position to wrap up the championship fairly significantly. I imagine he needs to take a lead, well, I say a gap of 120 points, given the fact the last round is double points again, so it might not well be settled until we get to that point. So the Radical Cup certainly putting on some good entertainment for our first race today. Quite a busy schedule at Paul Ricard today, not just with Radicals, but also with the 2 single-seater championships is supporting today, Spanish F4 and Euro Cup 3. And this will certainly put possibly Radical into the eyes of a few single-seater drivers who might want to give these cars a go, either here in France or in the mix. We're just waiting for the podium ceremony to get underway so we can crown our winners.
Unfortunately, there's not many of them here, but there was a sterling drive.
And podium celebration getting underway in a second.
So we hope to see a good battle again between the 2 of them for the next upcoming races. So taking first place in the top step, if we can please call out Marcus Littlewood of Littlewood Motorsport.
So Marcus Littlewood is called up as the SR1 winner. Again, unfortunate that we only had 2 of the SR1s this weekend, as was mentioned, but he stands in the middle and takes his trophy and gets a round of applause from all involved. So Marcus Littlewood taking some very valuable points. We're going to start first of all with the SR3s with the Fangio class. I'm hearing on that one from, I think that's Championship Coordinator Nicole van der Walt. So good to see her in the mix. And the results for them. So the Fangio class 3rd place for them goes to Peter Tyler in car number 80.
And 2nd place, huge well done to John McLeod of RSR.
John McLeod picking up 2nd place for RSR. So another podium for him in the category. Should mention in the podium, in fact, it is for the Fangio class. It's John McLeod who's leading the points coming to the weekend. Only 6 ahead of Jason Rishover. Peter Tyler in 3rd with 342. So only 13 points between the top 3 in Fangio Cup. And it's Chris Freen who picks up the victory, this time by Chris Freen, who came into the weekend 4th in points. Didn't do the Alton Park rounds, but good to see him back on the pace and also on the top step in the category.
A huge round of applause.
So They get the applause from the paddock. Your top three in the SR3 Fangio class in race 1 at Paul Ricard. Victory to Chris Preen from second place John McLeod and third place Peter Tyler. Now here comes the overall top three in SR3.
So huge well done to Oscar Joyce, third place DW Racing.
Third place going to Oscar Joyce. Great effort from the young Irishman. Well fought podium finish for him. Gets the trophy and the bubbly and the Hankook cap as well. A very fine performance from Oscar, his best performance of the season.
First place hat off, come back, second place, Chris Preen, Valor Racing. Well done.
It's his third podium of the season. Forgive me for Oscar Joyce. His second, third place in the week. I'll get my words out eventually. It's his third podium of the season, his second third place of the year as well. Chris Preen with his best results of the year. That beats his third place from the replacement Donington round 3 race at Snetterton.
Taking the top step, he had a bit of a challenge in the beginning by his rival,
and
Chris.
No surprises for those who follow the championship for who's on the top step of the podium.
Well done.
It is for the 9th time in 10 races in 2024. Chris Lulham for Valor Racing. Into the middle, and again gets the trophy, gets the bubbly and the Hankook cap. Becoming quite a familiar sight for Chris Lulham, and he adds another trophy to his growing collection from 2024.
Give all our podium places a huge well done.
And he has 2 more opportunities coming up later on this morning and this afternoon to add another as many as 160 points. Plus, of course, the bonuses for fastest lap and starting, to really see if he can take advantage and take an even bigger championship lead than he already has. So podium celebrations complete. That's race 1 of the day complete for Hagerty Radical Cup UK. For those of you watching this morning, thank you for joining us and getting up wherever you are around the world, particularly those from the UK at such an early hour as well, because of course it is at the moment currently about just coming up to 9 o'clock in the morning. So thanks for those who have tuned in. If you're watching back on replay, thanks for watching also. For myself, Scott Woodwist, and all of us here at Circuit Paul Ricard, join us in roughly round about a couple of hours' time for the next race of the season. It's going to be a quite interesting one for race 2. Is it going to be another win for Chris Lulham? We'll find out as he starts possibly race 2 from pole position. But from all of us here at Paul Ricard, we'll see you in just under a couple of hours for race 2 of the day of the Hagerty Radical Cup from Paul Ricard. Bye for now.